Hello and welcome to Sax Comprehensive. My name is Ken Gowdy, and in this video I will tell you everything that you need to know in order to play the saxophone. Now, because this channel is called Sax Comprehensive, it will be a comprehensive guide, which means that I will go through it in detail, but if I start rambling, you do have my permission to fast forward to the next section. So you've bought your new saxophone looking all nice and shiny, and you're ready to put it all together and start playing your first notes. But before you can do that, it is recommended that there are a few things that you should buy first. One of the things that is recommended that you buy is a saxophone stand. Now, saxophone stands come in all designs, shapes and sizes. You do have some saxophone stands that have extra security features, such as saxophone stands that actually will grab hold of the bell of the saxophone. They're called grabbers. You do have saxophone stands which will have a security cable which will go around, tie around the bell of the saxophone in case the saxophone is knocked. It will not fall off the stand. You do have stands which are portable, which can go into the bell of the saxophone. The stand that I use is this one here. As you can see, it's folded, but it's easy to assemble. You just pull out the legs and there it is assembled, and there it's ready to be used. Why do you need a saxophone stand? Will there be times when you're practicing with the saxophone and have to leave the saxophone? Maybe you're called away to do something. Maybe you want a break from playing the saxophone for some time and then come back to the saxophone. Well, if you are called away from the saxophone, what are you going to do with the saxophone during that time? You could dismantle it and put it back in the case, but then when you go back to playing it, you have to reassemble it, and it's not convenient. You could lay down the saxophone on a soft surface like a bed, but then the saxophone does have these keys sticking out, and if you lay it down on the surface, there is always the risk of bending these keys or rods, so you don't really want to do that. The easiest thing to do is just get a saxophone stand, and then when you're called away, you just take your saxophone and then you just put it on the stand, and then you can leave it and come back and then start playing it again. The next thing that is recommended that you buy is a pack of mouthpiece patches. Now, why do you need mouthpiece patches? Well, when you play the saxophone, the mouthpiece is going to go in your mouth, and your top teeth are going to rest on top of the mouthpiece. Now, because the surface of the top of the mouthpiece is smooth, what's going to happen when you put it in your mouth, the saxophone is going to slide in and out of your mouth because there's nothing to create some friction, and your teeth are going to slide up and down on the top of the mouthpiece. Now, the effects of that is that your teeth is going to scratch the top of the mouthpiece, and over time your teeth are going to create a groove in the mouthpiece, which means every time you play the saxophone, your teeth will naturally fall into that groove, which is not a bad thing. If you're going to keep the mouthpiece, it means that each time you play it, your mouth is going to be in the same position. However, when you want to use some other techniques such as subtoning, and you want to put your mouth in a different position, it's going to be difficult because your teeth are going to be slotted into that groove. Also, mouthpieces are expensive, and if in the future you want to sell it, you want to make sure that the mouthpiece is in the best condition possible. Also, when you play the saxophone, when you play notes, the saxophone begins to vibrate, which means the mouthpiece will also vibrate, and because your teeth is in contact with the top of the mouthpiece, you're going to feel those vibrations in your teeth and in your skull. Using a mouthpiece patch will dampen those vibrations, and not only will it dampen those vibrations, but it will also protect your mouthpiece from the scratches. You can buy mouthpiece patches in different colors. They also come in different thicknesses. I use the thick mouthpiece patch because if I use a thin one, within a week my teeth will actually bite through it because my teeth are very sharp and jagged, and it will just bite through it and begin to scratch the top of the mouthpiece. So I use the thick one. They come in different qualities, so you want to make sure that you get a good quality mouthpiece patch. If you buy a cheap one, you're going to find that when you take it off, you peel it off the mouthpiece, it will leave a residue of glue on the mouthpiece, and so it's going to take you some time to clean up all of that glue in order to replace it with another mouthpiece patch. Also, you may find after using a mouthpiece patch for some time, it will actually leave a mark on top of the mouthpiece where you've actually placed it, so you can actually see a discoloration there where the mouthpiece patch has been placed. It is easy to stick a mouthpiece patch on a mouthpiece because a mouthpiece patch is self-adhesive. You just peel it off the backing and stick it onto the mouthpiece in the correct position. I would never play on a mouthpiece without a mouthpiece patch. Now, the last thing that you're going to have to buy is a reed, because you cannot play the saxophone without a reed. Now, maybe a reed came with your saxophone, maybe you bought it from the shop and the shopkeeper gave you a free reed for you to try. If it did not come with a reed, then you're going to have to go into a shop and buy one. So which reed do you buy? Reeds are made from different materials. You can get synthetic or plastic reeds, which are made from a synthetic material. You can get cane reeds, which are made from an organic material, cane, grown in the earth. And you can get a combination of both, cane reeds covered with a plastic coating. Cane reeds are more popular. The main advantages of cane reeds are that they are cheaper compared to the other types of reeds, and there are lots of choice of brands and cuts. The cut refers to how the cane is shaven to a particular design to give a better articulation, response or tone. You will not notice the difference in cut by just looking at it unless comparing filed reeds to unfiled reeds. Filed reeds have more of the cane shaved away just above the stalk or bark of the reed. The disadvantages of cane reeds are that they are inconsistent, meaning that in a box of 10 reeds, you will find different qualities of reeds. Some will play really well, while others not so well. Also, cane reeds attract mold and bacteria, so they will need to be cleaned regularly. Synthetic reeds are more consistent but are more expensive. For the price of one synthetic reed, you can buy 10 cane reeds. Though having said that, synthetic reeds last longer and are less likely to be damaged by accident. When you get a box of new reeds, as a beginner, you probably just take the reed out of the box and out of its small plastic container and then start playing on it. But as you get more experience, you might want to break in the reed and prepare the reed first before you start playing on it. Because if you break in the reed, then that will allow the reed to last longer. And when you consider reeds can be quite expensive in a box, so if you break it in, which allows the reed to last longer, that can actually save you money. Now, there are so many different ways of breaking in a reed. Each musician will have their own secret ritual in breaking in their reeds. But one thing that you could do, you could get your reed and play on it for 1 minute the first day within the middle register, 2 minutes the second day, 3 minutes the third day, and start to increase the time that you play on it, increase the registers that you play within, and that will gradually break in the reed and will get the reed to become accustomed to the forces that will be applied to it, and therefore prolong the life of the reed and save you money. Some musicians will take the cane reed and hold it up to the light, allow the light to shine on the reed so that they can look at the cane reed and see the structure of the fibers within the reed as a dark outline. Now, if this dark outline is in the shape of a V shape, that's symmetrical, then they will consider the reed to be a good reed. If not, then it's not such a good reed. Some musicians, in order to prolong the life of their reeds, may decide not to play on any particular reed for more than 45 minutes at a time. And so they will play their reeds in a rotation, play this reed and then change it for another reed and then change it for another reed. They may actually store them in cases where each particular slot for each reed has a particular number, so they can keep track of which reed they're actually using as they play in this kind of rotation. They may use scraping tools to flatten the flat side of the stock part of the reed or rub it on smooth paper. They may try to seal the pores of the reed by pressing down on the shape part with their fingernails or a spoon, or even shave it more. This breaking in and preparing period can last weeks or even months for certain individuals. Check out what David Sanborn does when he prepares his reeds. However, as a beginner, you probably just want to play on the reed straight out of the packet, and when it finally dies or gets damaged, to change it. Reeds come in different resistances. A low number on the reed will mean that it is a softer reed and therefore easier to play on. A higher number will mean that the reed is stiffer and therefore harder to play. Reeds may also have the letters S, M and H for soft, medium and hard. As a beginner, you should start with a soft reed such as a 1.5 or possibly a 2. But be aware that these resistance indicators are not the same across brands. So a 2 on one brand may feel like a 2.5 on another brand. So always consult a reed chart when buying a different brand so you know how the resistances compare across the brands and what is the overlap. When I was a beginner, the reed that I liked the most was a Rico or Diodario hemp key fouled reed strength 2. I found that it was easier to play on than the other reeds that I tried at the time. Now let me speak quickly about mouthpieces and ligatures. Regarding ligatures, they affect the sound the least, with some arguing that they make no change to the sound whatsoever. So if upgrading your ligature, it's best to choose one based on the ease of use or the look, rather than how it might change your tone. My first ligature had 2 screws, so I upgraded it to one which had 1 screw, the Van Doren Optimum, which I found to be easy to use. Later I intend to buy a ligature with no screws like the Power Ring. Some ligatures hold the reed well, while others move and scratch the mouthpiece, so you will need to do your research before buying one. There is a huge choice of mouthpieces, plastic, ebonite, hard rubber and metal, with lots of comparison videos on the internet which may make you want to go out and upgrade your mouthpiece. My advice is don't upgrade your mouthpiece until you're able to play the saxophone well and have a good control of the notes, because if you upgrade early, you may not hear or appreciate the subtle differences in tone, and before you know it, you have several mouthpieces which all sound alike. Just because a mouthpiece is expensive, it does not mean that it is better. Watch some of those comparison videos between cheaper and expensive mouthpieces and read the comments, and you will soon realize that there is not much difference in sound between them, or at least not worth the extra money that you will have to pay. The main thing for the beginner to look out for is the baffle and the tip opening. The baffle is the design inside of the mouthpiece under the beak. This will mostly determine whether the sound is bright or dark. The tip opening is the distance of the gap between the tip of the reed and the tip of the mouthpiece. The smaller the tip opening, the easier it is to play on, so as a beginner, it may be better to play on a smaller tip opening mouthpiece. Larger tip opening mouthpieces allow you to force more air into the saxophone and therefore play louder, but it's harder to control the notes and stay in tune. So now we come to the stage of assembling the saxophone, and as you can imagine, different musicians will assemble their saxophones in a slightly different way. So I will tell you how I assemble my saxophone, tell you how others assemble their saxophones, and that will give you a good understanding so that you can make your own choice how you would like to assemble your saxophone. When I assemble my saxophone, as a quick overview before I go into it in more detail, the first thing I do is to prepare the reed. Now this is a cane reed, so it needs to be prepared before you use it. So I prepare the reed, then I'll put the reed onto the mouthpiece, and then I secure the reed to the mouthpiece by using a ligature. So once I've tightened up the ligature so it looks something like this, then I put the mouthpiece setup onto the neck so it looks something like this. Now other individuals would do it slightly differently. They will start again by preparing the reed, but the thing that is different is that they will take their mouthpiece, and then first they will put their mouthpiece onto the neck like this. Then they will take their prepared reed, put it onto the mouthpiece, and then secure it with the ligature. So it looks something like this. So that's 2 different ways of actually doing it. But regardless of whether you start with the mouthpiece, then connect the reed and the ligature to it, or whether you start with the mouthpiece connected to the neck and then put the reed and the ligature on it, one thing that you must do is prepare the reed. Now there are various different ways how you can actually prepare the reed. A reed has 2 parts. It has the vamp part and it has the stock part. When I prepare my reeds, the first thing I do is to wet the vamp part of the reed, and I only wet the vamp part of the reed. Others will wet the whole reed, but I only wet the vamp part of the reed. And the way I do that is to get my reed, if it's in one of these small little plastic cases, I take it out. I first look at the reed to make sure there's no bacteria on it. Obviously, you probably won't be able to tell if there's bacteria on it, but unless you see these black spots on it, because if there's a lot of bacteria, you'll begin to see some discoloration and black spots on it. Then obviously you're going to have to go away and clean it. But if it looks okay, then what you do, you put the vamp part of the reed in your mouth and moisten it or wet it with your saliva for a period of time. The length of time that you keep the reed in your mouth is down to personal preference. Usually I would keep the reed in my mouth for less than a minute, though others may keep it in their mouths between 1 to 5 minutes. If you're one of those individuals that like to wet the whole reed, then what you need to do is just take the reed out of your mouth, turn it around and put the stock part of the reed in your mouth and allow your saliva to soak into the stock part of the reed as well. Those that wet both parts of the reed, the vamp and the stock, by putting it in their mouths and then turning it around and putting the stock part in their mouths, may also put saliva on the table of the mouthpiece. Now what that does is when you take your reed and you put it on your mouthpiece to set it up, because there is a film of saliva between the reed and the mouthpiece, it acts like a glue and it creates a seal, a bond between the reed and the mouthpiece. Also, when you are setting up the mouthpiece, you're going to have to make these minute adjustments to the reed to get it in the correct position, and having the saliva there may make it easier, because if it wasn't there, then the reed will slide about so easily and it might make it a little bit difficult if you're not used to it. However, I don't do that. All I do is just wet the vamp part of the reed, and I leave it up to the ligature to create the seal between the reed and the mouthpiece. If you're one of those individuals that like to soak your reed more than 3 minutes, then having it in your mouth for more than 3 minutes can be inconvenient. So something else that you can do is to get a large bowl of water. So here I have a measuring container. Now it's a large measuring container, which means if you want to just soak the vamp part, the good thing about it, because it's a large container, you can slide the reed down the side of the container and it will actually stick to the side of the container, so that you can position the reed in the container so that the water only reaches up to the top of the vamp. So that way you're really soaking the vamp part of the reed and not so much the stock part of the reed. If you're one of those individuals that want to soak the whole reed for more than 3 minutes, then obviously you can just take the reed and put it into a bowl of water and just let it sit there so that the water soaks into the total reed. Alternatively, if you don't want to wait around for your reed to soak up your saliva or water, then what you can do is get yourself a reed storage device that will actually keep your reeds at a certain humidity. So these two cases will actually keep the reeds from drying out. This is the Diodario humidification storage system, and in it actually holds 8 reeds, but you have this humidification pack. Now this one is 72%. You can get them in different percentage of humidity, so if you want the reeds to be more dry or less dry, you just have a different pack with a different percentage on it. This will actually keep the humidity inside the case at this particular 72%. If there's too much moisture in it, then this pack will actually soak in the moisture. If the reeds are drying out, this would expel moisture in this airless case or airtight case. This one is called the Rejuvenate, and inside there is a sponge which you fill with original Listerine, or in my case you fill it with vodka, and what that does is sterilizes the reeds and also keep the reeds from drying out. Comparing both of these cases, then I would say if you want a reed that is moist, then this one works a lot better than this one. When you take out the reeds from both of these cases and look at the color of it, you can see that the reeds in this case are wetter than the reeds in this case. Now, these can be quite expensive, and so you may want to make your own, and all you need to do is just get an airtight container. So either get yourself a zip bag so that it's airtight, or get yourself some kind of airtight Tupperware. Then get your reeds that are in their individual plastic cases. Just put all of the reeds that you want in there. Then put the humidification pack in there and then close it so it's airtight. And that will do the same job as this. When putting the reed on the mouthpiece, you want to make sure that the reed is positioned parallel to the mouthpiece and not slanted at an angle to one side or the other, or placed more to one side than the other. You also want to make sure that the tip of the reed is either in line with the tip of the mouthpiece or just below the tip of the mouthpiece. An easy way to do this is to gently press down the reed so that the tip of the reed touches the tip of the mouthpiece, and position the reed so that you can see a little line of the tip of the mouthpiece showing behind the tip of the reed. You should have the reed as close to the tip of the mouthpiece as you can, but never above the tip of the mouthpiece. Once the reed is lined up correctly, then a ligature can be put on and tightened. There will probably be a ligature line on the mouthpiece. Place the ligature after that line. For the beginner, you can start by placing a ligature somewhere in the middle of the barrel of the mouthpiece, but later you should experiment with the position, since different positions can change the sound produced. After you tighten the ligature, check again that the reed is in the ideal position, and if not, adjust accordingly. You need to be careful sliding the ligature over the reed, because if you hit the reed with the ligature, you may split it and damage the reed. Alternatively, you could put the ligature on first and slide the reed under the ligature stock first, which will remove this danger. Once you've completed the mouthpiece setup, and if the mouthpiece is not already connected to the neck, then connect the mouthpiece to the neck. If you're finding it difficult to slide the mouthpiece onto the neck, then put some cork grease onto the neck and smear it in with your fingers, and you will find it a lot easier to do that. Do not slide the mouthpiece fully down onto the neck, but there should be some cork showing. You will make some final adjustments later. And then replace the mouthpiece cap to protect the reed. The next thing that we are going to do, we're going to connect the neck to the body of the saxophone. So open the case and pick up the saxophone by the bell. Always pick it up by the bell. This is the bell. So always pick up your saxophone holding the bell. Do not pick it up holding it here, here or here, because as you can see, there are all these keys sticking out and rods, and if you hold it too tightly, you might bend the rods or bend the keys, and then you damage the saxophone. If you always pick it up by the bell, then you know your saxophone will be safe. At the top of the saxophone, you will see an end cap. This end cap is very important, so don't throw it away, and make sure you always replace the end cap on your saxophone when you're storing it away in its case. This end cap has a purpose. It is to protect the octave mechanism. You can actually see this pin here which sticks out. That's what this actually protects. If it wasn't there, as you can see, there's nothing protecting this pin. So when it's in there, this pin, octave pin, is actually protected. So we take out the end cap, then we take the neck, and with a twisting motion we slide it into the socket. We line it up so it's more or less straight with the octave pin. And then as you can see, there are two screws. One is to tighten the socket so that this doesn't twist. The other screw is for a mini music stand. You can actually tell by looking at it which one will actually tighten the socket. So my saxophone, I tighten this one just so that it doesn't move. You don't have to over tighten it or you might damage the screw and the thread. So it doesn't move. The other one, if you're tightening this one and this still moves, then obviously you know you're tightening the wrong screw. Once you've done that, and if you've taken my advice and got yourself a saxophone stand, then you can actually take your saxophone, rest it on the stand, and now you can go away, have a break, congratulate yourself for lasting this long so far in the video, or go away and get your saxophone neck strap. If you went away and got your neck strap, it'll probably look like one of these. These are the neck straps which came with my saxophones. So this is the neck strap which came with my Selma Mark II alto saxophone, and this is a neck strap which came with my P. Moriat tenor saxophone. And as you can see, they basically look alike. They're adjustable just the same way. You adjust it in the same way. What is different is the hooks at the end. This one has an open hook, whereas this one has a spring-loaded catch. So this one is a closed hook, whereas this one is an open hook. And basically what you would do is put the neck strap over your neck. You'll pick up your saxophone by the bell. At the back of the saxophone is a ring. And you basically just take the hook and then put it in the ring, and then the saxophone is secure. Now, if you have a neck strap like this, when you're playing, it gives you free movement. You can play with the saxophone all around. You can play with the saxophone at the side. You can play with the saxophone at the front, and there's free movement, which is very good. However, as you can see, the weight of the saxophone is pulling down on the neck strap, which means it's pulling down on the back of my neck. And also, because of the design of the neck strap, as the weight pulls down, the sides close in on the side of your neck. When you start playing with it, it'll be fine, but if you practice every day, you practice for long hours, you may find that this neck strap will cause you some discomfort around your neck, and some people will also maybe even damage their neck because of the stress caused by the weight of the saxophone pulling down on the neck strap. And if that is the case, then they would obviously upgrade their neck strap. Now there are loads of different neck straps on the market, loads of neck strap which will actually shift the weight of the saxophone from the pulling down on the back of your neck to your shoulders. One such neck strap is the JazzLab sax holder, and this is the one that I mainly use, and as you can see, it just clips up, and basically this one is the latest version. It has a push button to release these handles, and you just put it around your neck, click it into place, and then it's got a hook at the end which you hook the saxophone to. And this works very well, and out of all of my neck straps, this I would say is the best. When I first saw it, it looks pretty flimsy, and you'd think that you put it on and it'll just fall off your neck and damage your saxophone. And that was one of the reasons why I did not decide to buy it. But I've got a friend who plays the saxophone, and he recommended it because he's got one and he says it's a fantastic neck strap. So I got myself one, and so far I haven't had any problems with it. It's never fallen off my neck. There are some issues with it, which I have done a video review about, and I've explained it in there. Some people may choose to have a harness. Now this one is the Van Doren harness, and you've got these straps which go around your waist, and then you've got these bits that go over the shoulder. So it's secured around your waist and around your shoulder. So it's something like this, and the straps you will just click around your waist, and the shoulder bits are adjustable so they can go up or down, and it goes over your neck, and you connect your saxophone to the hook. I have done a review about this one also if you want to see that. To adjust your saxophone to the correct position, get your neck strap, get the hook, and hook it onto the ring at the back of your saxophone so your saxophone is now secure. Then if you put your thumb of your right hand under the thumb hook, you should be able to push the saxophone out so that it pivots on the neck strap by the hook. So it pivots right there. Now you adjust the height with this little catch here, the regulator, by sliding it down. You'll lower the saxophone by sliding it up. You raise the saxophone. So what you want to do is get it in a good position so that you can actually hold the saxophone, push your right hand out so that it actually will fall into your mouth. But you want to make sure that it's in a nice position so that when it falls into your mouth, your head is not tilted back, because if it's too high up, then obviously it's not going to fall into my mouth. I'm going to have to move my head back to receive the mouthpiece. It's going to be uncomfortable. If it's too low, then obviously I can't reach it, so I'm going to have to stretch down, bend my neck. What you want is that your head is straight, your neck is straight, your head and neck is in a comfortable position for you. So you adjust it so that when you pivot the saxophone, it falls into your mouth in a nice, comfortable position. You can play your saxophone in a straight upward position, but you may want to tilt it at an angle. This will give you a better position for your hands. Now, if you do have the saxophone in a slanted position, then obviously the mouthpiece is also going to be slanted in your mouth. It's going to be at an angle. So just make sure that you turn the mouthpiece so that the mouthpiece, when it enters your mouth, is not in a slanted position. If you're going to play the saxophone while sitting down, then you can either put the saxophone between your legs and play it in an upright position, or you can place the saxophone to your side. Now, if you play it towards your side, as you can see, the saxophone is now leaning. What you don't want to do is to lean your head so that the mouthpiece is straight. What you want to do is turn the mouthpiece so that the mouthpiece now fits straight in your mouth, but obviously the saxophone is now slanted. At the back of the saxophone, down at the bottom, you'll find the thumb hook. Now you place your thumb of your right hand under the thumb hook. The job of the thumb hook is so that you can stabilize the saxophone. If you place your thumb right under the thumb hook, then you may find that the top of the thumb hook will begin to rub against the top of your thumb and cause some discomfort there. So some musicians, rather than having it trapped under the thumb hook, will move their thumb a little down, or may even place it over this screw. Or they may buy a different type of thumb hook, one which has a platform over this key so that they can place their thumb over this key. Basically, you're trying to find a position that best suits your hand. You want a comfortable position for your thumb. If you undo this screw with a coin or with a screwdriver, depending on the make of your saxophone, you may be able to move this thumb hook up and down or swivel it left to right to get a better angle for your thumb when your thumb goes underneath it. Whatever you do, make sure you adjust the neck strap correctly, because you don't want the saxophone pulling down on your thumb. Because what would happen if the saxophone is too low and it's actually pushing down on your thumb, then you can damage your thumb, and it would take a few weeks or even months for it to actually heal for you to be able to play the saxophone again. So make sure you adjust your neck strap correctly. At the back of the saxophone at the top, you will find a thumb rest. You place your thumb of your left hand on the thumb rest, which is basically a piece of plastic which doesn't move. You place it on the thumb rest, but you extend it so part of your thumb extends over this octave mechanism key. So part of your thumb is resting on a thumb rest and part of your thumb is extended over this octave mechanism key so that you can swivel your thumb so that it actually will press the octave key down and lift it up. At the front of the saxophone, down at the bottom, you will see 3 pearls. 1, 2, 3. You'll also see these 2 keys here. Now, the way your right hand goes is that your index finger goes on the first pearl, your middle finger goes on the next pearl, and your ring finger goes on the next pearl. So 1, 2, 3. The pinky rests anywhere on those 2 keys. Obviously at the back, you've got your thumb under the thumb hook, and the tips of your fingers are on the pearls, and you got your fingers in a curved shape. So they're not straight, but they're curved. At the front of the saxophone at the top, you can see there are lots of keys, and different saxophones are made differently, so they may look a little different. Some may have pearls and some may have teardrops. So at the top here, you can see my one has a teardrop, but on some saxophones you may have another pearl. So make sure you consult the diagram. Down here you can see there is a pad with 4 keys. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 keys here. Your pinky of your left hand will rest anywhere on that pad because your left hand pinky will be used to play any of those 4 keys. Above it, there is a pearl, so the next finger goes on that pearl. Above it, there's another pearl, so this finger goes on that pearl. Now above it, you can see another pearl, but it's smaller than all the rest. This is called the bis key. You skip that and go to the pearl above it, and that's where your index finger goes. So your little finger is resting on anywhere on this pad of 4 keys. Your ring finger is on the first pearl here at the bottom. Then the next pearl up is your middle finger. Then you skip the small little bis key and then go to the next pearl where your index finger is. So we will label it as 1, 2, 3, and your pinky rests anywhere on this pad. So the resting position for your fingers look like this. Your fingertips should be on the pearls, your fingers should be curved, your shoulders should be down, your head and neck should be straight, and you should be relaxed. So now that we can assemble the saxophone, the next thing that we need to talk about is our embouchure. Now, our embouchure refers to our facial muscles, our lips, our teeth, the shape of the inside of our mouths and our throats, and how we use all of those things to create a seal around the mouthpiece for when we put the mouthpiece in our mouths. Now, there are various ways how we can form an embouchure, and each way of forming an embouchure is valid and used by professionals. So I will go through a few ways of forming embouchures. When you look at the mouthpiece setup, you will notice that the reed is in contact with the mouthpiece along the length of the table. But then, because the mouthpiece starts to curve away, the reed is no longer in contact with the mouthpiece for the rest of its length. At the point where the mouthpiece starts to move away from the reed, this is the best place to line up your lower teeth for normal playing. Having your lower teeth lined up in a different place will affect the tone. For example, subtones are produced by moving the lower teeth closer to the tip. So you may want to experiment with the position of the lower teeth. Now from here, it is just a matter of how you place your lips that will determine the type of embouchure you create. The most popular form of embouchure, called the single lip embouchure, is formed by placing your upper teeth in contact with the top of the mouthpiece and curling your lower lip slightly over your lower teeth to create a cushion for the reed. Make sure that you do not curl the fleshy part of the lower lip over your lower teeth, as this is soft and can easily be cut by the lower teeth. Also, do not curl a lot of the lower lip over the lower teeth. Some jazz players may curl their lower lip out to produce a better jazz tone. Lastly, squeeze the corner of your lips in to create a seal around the mouthpiece with your lips. Another form of embouchure closely related to this is formed by not curling your lower lip over your lower teeth. If doing this, make sure that you do not touch the reed with your lower teeth, as this will create a squeak. This type of embouchure may be difficult to do and control the notes, but has the advantage of removing the possibility of biting. The last embouchure to consider is called a double lip embouchure, and here you curl both of your lips over your teeth. This is the embouchure used by John Coltrane. But as said before, the single lip embouchure is the most common form of embouchure and therefore mainly taught in videos, and this should be your first form of embouchure that you should try. So now at long last, we have finally come to that stage when we can start playing notes on the saxophone, because now we know how to set up the saxophone. And what I suggest that we do is that we learn how to play a single note, then learn how to tongue a note, then learn how to play a scale, and then learn how to play some simple songs within that scale or key of the music. So what I want you to do to start off with is just put your fingers in their correct resting positions, as I showed you before, with your fingers lightly resting on the keys. And then what I want you to do is just press down in your left hand 1, 2, and 3. Just 1, 2, and 3. Do not press down the octave key, and then blow and see what you get. Now that note is a G. Then what I want you to do is do the same thing. Press down 1, 2, and 3, but also now press down the octave key. Now that is also G, but that is an octave above because you press down the octave key. And then try and play both of them together. So press down 1, 2, and 3, play it without the octave key, and then add the octave key. Now, when you try that, a few things could happen. Maybe when you tried it, no sound came out whatsoever. Maybe when you tried to play that first G without the octave key, it didn't sound that low G, it sounded an octave above, like the second G with the octave key. Maybe you got a squeak. Now, the more you practice and the more you experiment with how much air pressure you blow into the saxophone and experiment with your embouchure, all of those things will iron themselves out and you get used to making a nice sound. If no sound came out whatsoever, then there are a few things that you can look at. Number one, to produce the sound on the saxophone, you do need to have a good force of air going through the saxophone. So make sure you blow a strong force of air through the saxophone, because the reed will not vibrate without a good pressure of air blowing onto it. Sometimes we think about the saxophone being a loud instrument and we don't want to create a loud noise, and so we get a bit shy and timid and therefore we don't blow hard. But what I want you to do is just forget about that, forget about the neighbors, blow a strong airflow through the saxophone, create the sound, and then you can experiment afterwards by lowering the pressure of the air in order to get a lower sound. Now, if you're still having problems, the next thing could be your embouchure. Now, what you want to do is to apply more pressure in this direction. So your upper lip and bottom lip closing in more around the reed, because what you want to do is to apply a bit of pressure onto that reed, so that at the point, remember I told you your bottom teeth is lined up to a certain point on the mouthpiece. If you're using that single lip embouchure, then by applying more pressure, you get this point acting like a pivot, and then the reed can vibrate against that point and make a sound. So try those two things, blowing harder or applying, clamping down more on the mouthpiece. Obviously you don't want to clamp down too strongly, because then you might begin to start hurting your teeth and hurting your lip, because you know you're biting. You don't want to bite down on it, and obviously you don't want it to be too loose. So it's just trying to find that right position, that right amount of pressure on the reed to get the note to come out. There are two ways how you can blow air out of your mouth, and therefore two ways how you can blow air into the saxophone. One way is to blow out cold air, and the other way is to blow out warm air. So if you put your hand in front of your mouth, you can blow out cold air, so it feels cold, or you could blow out warm air, so it feels warm. You want to blow that second way. So when you're blowing into the saxophone, try and blow this warm air. So think in your mind blowing warm air, because then that will open up your throat and will allow you to produce a better quality of sound on the saxophone. So never try and blow cold air, but always think about blowing warm air. When we play a note in the saxophone, there are two ways how we can start the note and stop the note. The first way is called a breath attack, which basically means when we want to start a note, we just blow into the saxophone, and that air pressure will cause the reed to start vibrating and create the sound. And then obviously to stop the sound when the reed is vibrating because of the air that we're blowing into it, all we need to do is just stop blowing, and then the reed will stop vibrating and there'll be no sound. The problem with a breath attack is that it doesn't give you a clean start and a clean stop to the note. The note kind of sounds somewhat fuzzy in those areas, the beginning and the end. So what musicians would do, they'll use a technique called tonguing to give you a clean start to the note and a clean stop to the note. And basically what they do is to use their tongue to stop the reed from vibrating. So here, if the reed is vibrating and this is the tongue, so to stop a note, all you need to do is just put your tongue onto the reed and the reed will stop vibrating, and therefore there'll be no sound. Or to start a note, you start with your tongue resting on the reed, apply some air pressure, and then as soon as you take your tongue off the reed will start vibrating and create a sound. Now there are various ways how you can use your tongue to start and stop a note. And a lot of it has to do with the length of our tongues, because we all have different anatomies. Some of us have longer tongues, some of us have shorter tongues. So if you have a long tongue, then there may be just one way how you can tongue a note. If you have a short tongue, there may be just one way how you can tongue a note. But if you got a certain size tongue, then you can choose between these various ways of tonguing a note. Some people tongue the note with the tip of their tongue just under the tip of the reed. Here the action is mainly from the tip of the tongue, so the rest of the tongue is stationary. So to start the note, you place the tip of your tongue just under the tip of the reed so it cannot vibrate. Make sure that it's near the tip of the reed so that no squeaks are produced. Then you start blowing to build up some air pressure. Then you release the tip of your tongue, which will cause the reed to start to vibrate immediately and create the sound. Then to stop the note, you place the tip of your tongue back on the reed in the same position, which will stop the reed from vibrating and stop the sound. It is argued by those that use this method that using only the tip of your tongue will help when playing notes faster. Also, because it's just the tip that is mainly moving, you are not changing your oral cavity a lot, so the space within your mouth remains virtually the same, and therefore you are not changing the dynamics of the sound. Also, since you are only using the tip of your tongue, this creates a cleaner start and stop to the notes so that the notes do not sound muffled. Notice that the airflow is constantly flowing through the saxophone, and the use of the tongue is merely to stop the reed vibrating rather than to stop the airflow. When playing a succession of tongued notes, the tongue should quickly and lightly touch the reed. This is the best way to get the same consistency between the notes. Some people may close off the mouthpiece when they tongue a note. This will stop the airflow. This would have the effect of creating a strongly tongued note which you will hear as opposed to lightly touching the reed. Others will lightly touch the reed in such a way so that the reed still vibrates but the sound is dampened when tonguing between notes. You would have to experiment with how much pressure you want to apply to the reed when you tongue, whether you want to close off the mouthpiece and stop the airflow, or touch the reed to stop it vibrating while keeping the airflow, which is better, or to lightly touch the reed so that the reed still vibrates but the sound is dampened just before playing the next note. But remember, the whole point of tonguing is to stop the sound, not necessarily the airflow. Another way of tonguing a note is to position the tip of the tongue down by the teeth and to raise the tongue so somewhere further back on the tongue touches the tip of the reed. So again, here you start with the tongue touching the tip of the reed so that it will not vibrate. Then you build up the air pressure by blowing, and when ready, you lower your tongue so that the reed will start vibrating. To stop the reed again, you raise your tongue until it touches the reed again and stops it vibrating. Another way of tonguing is to do the same as just mentioned, but this time the tip of the tongue is anchored somewhere at the base of the teeth and stays there. This will be difficult to do by those who have short tongues. So that was a few ways of tonguing used by musicians, and each will have their own advantages and disadvantages. This last way of tonguing is the way that I tongue, and many other saxophone players use that same type of tonguing. So the tip of your tongue is down at the bottom of your teeth where it actually meets the gum. The tip is anchored there and stays there, and all that you need to do then is just to raise the middle of your tongue until it actually meets the reed. So now we're going to learn how to play the C major scale. When playing notes on the saxophone, try to imagine that your fingertips are stuck to the pearls so that they do not come off the pearls. So when you're playing, try not to lift your fingers off the pearls. Also, when you press down or close a key, then just use enough force so that you can close the key. It doesn't have to be pushed down with excessive force. If you use excessive force, grip hold of the saxophone tightly, then you're only going to put stress into your fingers, which will make it difficult for you to play at speed. The C major scale is one of the easiest scales to learn because the finger positions are easy to remember. Basically, for most of the scale, you're just going to raise up the lowest finger one at a time until you get to the top note. So you're going to start by pressing down in your left hand 1, 2, 3. And then in your right hand, 1, 2, 3. That's how we're going to label it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then at the bottom with these two keys, you're going to press the lowest of the keys, which is the low C key. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the low C key. Now that would give you low C. So if you blow into your saxophone, you should get a low C. Then what we're going to do, the octave key is not pressed down at this time. What we're going to do is just going to, one at a time, remove the lowest finger until we get to the top. So the lowest finger is this pinky. So I'm going to release that pinky. So now that all I've got pressed down is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's going to give me D. Then I'm going to release the next lowest finger, which is this one. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That will give me E. Then release the lowest finger. So now it's going to be this finger. So that gives me 1, 2, 3, and 1. That gives me F. Then to release the lowest finger again, which will be this finger. So that just gives me 1, 2, 3. That gives me G. Then the lowest finger will be this one. So if I release that one, that will just give me 1 and 2. Then to release the lowest finger would be this one, which will just leave me with 1 pressed down. That would give me B. Then from here, I flip my fingers from this one to this one. So now I'm just pressing down just the 2 key. Nothing else but the 2 key. That gives me C again, but an octave above the first C that I played. From here, I go back to the beginning, whereby I had 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But now I'm not going to press down that C key. So all I've got down, pressed down, is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the octave key. I'm going to keep the octave key pressed down from now on as I get higher and higher in the notes. So this now gives me D. Then if I do exactly the same thing and release the lowest finger until I get to the top. So the lowest finger would be this one. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That gives me E. Release the lowest finger, which will be that one. So that gives me 1, 2, 3, and 1. That gives me F. Release the lowest finger, which will be this one. So now I've got pressed down 1, 2, 3. That gives me G. Release the lowest finger, which is this one. So now that I've got pressed down is 1 and 2. And that gives me A. Then I release the lowest finger, which is this one. So now I've only got 1 pressed down, and that gives me B. And then again, what I did last time was flip the fingers. So now I'm pressing down just the 2 key. That's all. And obviously with the octave key pressed down, that will give me the last note, C. So all that you're doing is from that low C, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that low C key, you're just going to release the lowest finger one at a time until you get to the top. Then you're going to flip. So you're just pressing down the 2 key. Then you're going to press down 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 with the octave key pressed down. And then from there, you're going to do the same thing. Release the lowest key one at a time till you get to the top. Then flip again so that you got that 2 key pressed down, which will give you C. Once you can play the C major scale going up, then play it in reverse going down. Then if you are a complete beginner, then try these 2 simple songs. Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. You can check out my other videos on how to play the other 11 major scales or how to play the chromatic scale, which has every note on the saxophone. When you start playing the saxophone as a beginner, you probably won't be concerned about whether you are playing in tune or out of tune, or whether the notes that you play are at the correct pitch. But as you become more experienced and as you start to play with backing tracks and other musicians, you're going to have to think about your tuning, because if you play with backing tracks and you play with other musicians and you're not playing in tune at the correct pitch, then obviously it's going to be quite noticeable that you are playing off. So what you're going to have to do beforehand is to tune your saxophone. Now, in order to tune your saxophone, you're going to need some form of tuner. And with the tuner, all that you're going to do is adjust the position of the mouthpiece. Either push the mouthpiece further in or put it further out. And with the tuner, you'll be able to find out which is the correct position for the mouthpiece in order to tune your saxophone. To tune the saxophone, you first need to choose a note to tune to. Let's say that that note is a concert A, which is a good note to use. Because the saxophone is a transposing instrument, to sound a concert A note, you need to finger an F sharp on an alto saxophone and a B on a tenor saxophone. Now play that note with your normal embouchure without the octave key and check whether that note produced is in tune on the tuner. If it is flat, push the mouthpiece in slightly. If it's sharp, pull the mouthpiece out slightly. Do this until the note played is in tune. Once done, the saxophone will be tuned, and whenever you play a concert A, it will be in tune, and hopefully if you have a good saxophone, all of the other notes will be in tune as well. If you find that a note is not in tune, then you'll have to adjust the pitch of that note individually by adjusting your embouchure, since there's nothing else that you can do by changing the position of the mouthpiece to change the pitch of that individual note. You may find that using a different note to tune the saxophone to instead of concert A may help if you're still having problems. Also be aware that the temperature of the room will affect the tuning of the saxophone, so you may need to recheck the tuning once you have warmed up the saxophone by playing for a while. After you've been playing on the saxophone for a long period of time, you may have noticed that there is a buildup of condensation inside of the saxophone. If you were to turn it upside down, you may see some liquid fall out of the saxophone. If you look down in the bell at the bottom of the saxophone, you may see a little puddle in there. Or if you look on the outside of the body, you may see some droplets of liquid on the outside. Or maybe if you're more unfortunate, as you were playing the saxophone, you may have noticed that your fingers get very wet and you have to wipe off the liquid off your fingers as you're playing. All of that is condensation. It's not pure water, but that condensation is filled with all kind of contaminants, things produced from your body as you're blowing that warm air into the saxophone, sugars from the food that you were eating. It all gets into the saxophone, and if you leave it in there, it's going to cause damage to your saxophone. It may cause your keys to stick, so when you're playing, these keys don't release, they stay stuck down. Or it may cause damage to the pads and you'll have to take it in to get serviced. So you want to clean out all of that condensation. Now, the way you do that, you're going to have to get some cleaning cloths. You may have some cleaning cloths that came with the saxophone, or you're going to have to go and buy a pack of these cloths which come with other cleaning implements, such as small little cleaning brushes. So over the years, I've got polishing cloths, which are soft cloths, which you can clean down the outside of the saxophone. You get various types of swabs. So this one is a swab with 2 strings on either side, and you put it through the saxophone. This is another type of swab. It's got 1 string, it's got this kind of mesh on the bottom, and then the cloth, and you just put it through the saxophone. So basically what I use are 2 swabs with strings on it. One is a smaller swab and the other one is a larger swab. Now, these came from my various saxophones which I've owned, which I've just kept. So if I were to clean this, now it's going to be just a quick clean. Later on, you probably have to give it a more thorough clean. But what you do, you take off the neck, take off the mouthpiece, then take off the ligature, and then the reed. Usually what you do with the reed, you just get a piece of cloth, wipe off the reed so it's nice and dry, and then you put the reed back in its case. If you're using one of these small little plastic cases, you put it in there, or if you're using another type of case like the Diodario case, and you just put it in there, whichever one you're using, and then that gets stored away. Then the mouthpiece, you take the small swab, you take the string and you put it down the bore of the mouthpiece. So the string will go through that side, comes out the other side, and you just put it through. You never put the string through this side, but you always put it through the part which connects to the neck of the saxophone. Just put it through there, maybe 1 or 2 times, just put it through to get out the condensation that's in the inside of the mouthpiece, and then get a little bit of cloth and just wipe around the outside of the mouthpiece, and then that's good to be stored away. Obviously take care how you store this away. If you drop it, if you get any chips on it, then it's basically ruined. So you want to make sure that the table and the rails of the mouthpiece do not get damaged. So when you store this away, you might want to put it in a pouch or wrap it up in some kind of cloth to protect it. The ligature usually doesn't really need much doing to it. You may want to just wipe it down, but there's no condensation on the ligature, so that's fine. The neck would have condensation inside, so what you do, you take the same small swab which you use for the mouthpiece. Now, as you can see on the neck, you've got 2 holes, so put the cloth through the bigger hole. It should go all the way through to the other side. As you can see, you might be able to see there's liquid falling out of it now. And then you just pull it through. You might have to do it a few times just to make sure that it gets all of this condensation out from inside of the neck. And then take a piece of cloth and then wipe around the outside of the neck, and it's done. If you wanted to give it a more thorough clean, then you'd probably use one of these brushes and then put it inside and then clean out the inside of it. Now for the body of the saxophone, you use the bigger swab. It's the same sort of thing as a smaller swab, but it's just larger. And so pick up the body of the saxophone from the bell again, and then you take the string, you put it down the bell. It's got a weighted side, so in the bottom of this there are metal weights in here, so it just falls through. Then take the large bit of the swab, put it in the bell. If you hold the bell and turn it upside down, then you can see the string comes through, and then just like what you did with the neck, you just pull it through. And you do that a few times. Just to be careful when you're holding it and doing this, you may want to rest it on your knee, etc. Turn it upside down and then put it through. You may want to do it 2 or 3 times. And then you would want to get some of the polishing cloths and just go lightly around the outside of the saxophone to get rid of any fingerprints or any condensation that's come out from the tone holes and landed on the body of the saxophone. You might want to wipe those away as well. Obviously you don't want to go too rough on it in case you damage any of the keys. What I usually do, you don't have to do this, but what I usually do is get a small piece of cloth, and then I open up some of the keys which are spring closed. You open them up, you put the cloth between the key and the tone hole, and that will take out some of the condensation that's underneath those closed keys. The keys that are going to stick are the keys that when you put your saxophone in its case, those keys which are spring loaded closed. The keys that are open, they're obviously going to dry, and the condensation is just going to dry off. The keys that are closed, the condensation is going to dry with the keys closed, and that is going to form like a glue, which is going to stick the keys to the tone hole. So I basically take a cloth and then go through most of the keys that I usually have problems with. Just wipe it around, and then some of these other keys I might do the same sort of thing, do it kind of quickly. But like I said, you don't really need to do that. Then what I do, once I've done that, I will put it on my stand, and then I'll leave it there to air dry for an hour or so, and that will get rid of the condensation which is in there. You can buy things called pad savers, these kind of furry things, and they actually go inside. Once you clean it, they go inside of the saxophone to soak up some of the condensation that is left in there. So this one here goes in the bell of the saxophone, and this one here, it's got a little bit at the top like an end cap, and that goes down the top, right down into the saxophone. Now some people will use these pad savers and they will just leave it in their saxophone and leave their saxophone like that. Some may even put their saxophone with the pad savers in it inside of their case. Now there's different viewpoints on the use of these pad savers, and some like them, some dislike them. But one thing you've got to realize is that if there's condensation still left inside of the saxophone and you put the pad savers in there, then the pad savers are going to soak up that liquid, but that liquid is still going to be in the saxophone. So you don't want to leave the pad savers in there because you're still leaving that liquid in there, which is soaked into the pad savers. What you want to do is, if you're using a pad saver, get the liquid to soak into the pad saver and then take out the pad saver, which will be damp because it's soaked up the condensation, and then leave the saxophone out to air dry, or put it away in the case without the pad saver. Some people have also commented that these kind of strings on the pad saver do come off and then they fall into the saxophone and they get stuck on keys and get stuck inside of the saxophone. So you just got to really make up your mind whether you're going to actually use these or not. At some point you're going to want to do a deep clean. So if you go to the manufacturer's website for your mouthpiece, you will find instructions there on how to maintain and clean your mouthpiece. But what you could do is use some cold water, a soft cloth, and some mild detergent or soap and clean it. You could use a brush to clean the inside of the mouthpiece. What you don't want to do is use hot water. Hot water can deform the shape of the mouthpiece, which you don't want. And you don't want to use any chemicals because chemicals can change the color of the mouthpiece. There are cases where you have black ebonite mouthpieces turning green because they've used some kind of chemicals on it and there's a reaction with the chemicals. To clean the reeds, you're going to need some solution that you can put on the reed that will get rid of the buildup of bacteria and fungus, but still allow the reed to be safe for you to put it back in your mouth. So it's got to be harmless for your body. Lots of people use a chemical called hydrogen peroxide. They get the 3% version, the food grade quality. If it's food grade quality, it means it can be used on food and therefore should be safe for you to put it in your body. But always make sure that you read the warning labels. So what you would do with the hydrogen peroxide, you just pour it in a glass, you put the reeds in the solution, you will see some bubbles forming as it begins to work. Once those bubbles die down, then take the reeds out, rinse them in cold water, dry them off, and then put them back in their cases, and then they're ready for use.